Commission meeting of August 22nd to order. Call, please.
Anna here.
Grillo here. Kupczynski here.
Lorick here. Gavich here.
Guzikowski here.
Seifert here.
Chandler here.
And just for a note, the meeting officially kicked off at, we'll call it 6:17. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties here. That will get us to the approval of minutes of August the 8th, 2023. If everybody take a moment or two to review the minutes. If you are satisfied, there's no further discussions, omissions, errors, or corrections. Motion, please.
Seifert moves to approve the minutes of August 8th, 2023.
Guzikowski will second.
Roll call, beginning with Christine.
Anna, I.
Grillo, aye. Kupczynski abstains.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay, that will get us to the review and discussion of recent common council actions. Carrie?
Council approved the following: an ordinance approving a conditional use permit for general office use on the properties at 7101 and 7115 South Pennsylvania Avenue, and an ordinance rezoning a portion of the property at 9709 South Howell Avenue from RS3 Single Family Residential to RS2 Single Family Residential. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Is there any discussions or questions concerning the common council actions? Okay. Item 5 is review and discussion of recent Board of Housing and Zoning appeal actions. There are currently none. And item 6, the review and discussion report on the recent quarterly Parks and Recreation Commission actions. We will see that September the 12th of this year, 2023. We'll get us into item 7A, old business. That is review site, building, and related plans by Christopher Fink for a trash enclosure, parking lot expansion, and landscape on the property at 7101 and 7115 South Pennsylvania Avenue. Carrie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Plan Commissioners will recall that this was held at the June 13th meeting in order to address some of the outstanding issues and allow the applicant some time to prepare some revised plans. So this evening, we are going to be talking about those revisions that were received. It's also related to a CSM that was approved on May 2nd to combine those two properties, and a conditional use permit, as was mentioned in the Common Council actions, was just recently approved for the office use. On the screen right now and in your packets is a revised site plan showing the expansion of the asphalt and the proposed parking stalls, as well as a couple of updates. So in the packet, there was a bulleted list stating what some of the concerns were from the previous review. And with regard to parking, we said that on the eastern side, that parking stall and the asphalt did not meet the setback requirements. So you will note in the site plan that there are hatch marks or X's there indicating that the asphalt that did not meet that setback requirement and that parking stall will be removed. So that is also reflected in the landscape plan that was revised that we'll be talking about in a moment. So now, as proposed, the parking does meet requirements. There is also a note that is highlighted on here for the existing fence around the trash enclosure to be removed. That is required because per code, a wooden fence of 8 feet tall is not an allowed material for a trash enclosure. It needs to be masonry. And the reason for that is partly because we have experienced trash enclosure fires where the entire enclosure burns down when it's made from combustible materials. So we do have it as a code requirement that it needs to be masonry. If there is not to be a dumpster on the property, there is no need for an enclosure, just to make that clear. The 4-foot tall fence that was noted on the northwest corner of the house, that is to screen the residential garbage carts. So there's no issue with that, but again, if there is going to be a separate dumpster, it does need to be in an enclosure that meets code requirements. If there isn't one, there's no need. And there are no lighting plans that have been submitted, so there's no lighting that's being proposed in this plan. We'll talk about the sign and this life safety plan as we move on, but I wanted to draw your attention to the additional information that we received. And the first thing that's on the screen is the tree inventory. You'll recall that we had mentioned in the previous review that trees had been removed on the property prior to identifying what they were. So this tree inventory was prepared by a consultant through the use of aerial imagery and through Google Street View. So it's only an estimate of the trees that were removed. It's estimated that about 18 trees that may have met the criteria for at least 12 inches DBH were removed. We don't know the species, we don't know the condition, so there's a little bit of leniency, shall we say, to what staff has included in the report. If we were to go by the letter of the code, there would be a requirement to replace 54 trees, or to have the replacement of 54 trees on the property. Since we don't actually know the condition of the trees before they were removed, we don't know whether or not they actually met the criteria, whether or not they were dead, dying, diseased, anything like that. Staff is willing to propose a reduction in the number of trees, especially considering the amount of space on the property to replace those trees. So on the screen right now is a proposed landscape plan, and we'll go through it in more detail, but you can see that there is quite an extensive amount of landscaping that has been proposed here. So let's take it in a couple of steps. The yellow area is the area that is required for both one of the green infrastructure areas, a rain garden, and for screening of the parking area. The landscaping that is included in the rain gardens we're not going to talk about because that's going to be just a requirement for green infrastructure, so it has nothing to do with the landscaping requirements of the zoning code. However, the screening for the parking stalls is something that we do need to kind of address a little bit, and that is because everything that is highlighted in pink on the screen on the right, we either do not have the installation heights or the installation heights do not meet the minimum 3 feet at installation. Per code, screening of parking does need to have landscaping installed at a minimum height of 3 feet, maintained between 3 and 5. So that just needs to be updated in the plans. Whether the Plan Commission feels that the number of screen plantings should be enhanced or reduced is up to you. However, if we're going to have adequate screening, they do need to meet code requirements for that minimum install height. On the north and the west, the areas that are highlighted in green are proposed areas for trees to be installed. The two areas, the reason that we have them highlighted, there isn't a concern about the trees themselves, but more so the spacing. We want to make sure that the trees have enough space so that when they grow, they can be vital and they are not going to die. And we feel that grouping them so tightly would kind of lend themselves to possibly failing. We'd rather see those spread out a little bit more, even if it means a reduction in the number of trees, but just so that they're spread on the property so that they have a chance to survive, really. What's in red are the existing trees that have not been removed, and those are going to be maintained on the property. Along the west itself are arborvitae, so we do need to make sure that we have enough spacing so that those arborvitae can both expand and grow in height. Finally, the area in blue is what we are proposing and what we have proposed in the staff report as being the end of the buffer area, the transition area to the property to the south, which is residential. And the reason that we have identified that as being an area where we can kind of stop the buffer is because really the business portion is contained in the parking, building, and garage area. So if that area is screened, we feel that it is not entirely necessary to continue that buffer if there's not going to be anything else on the west side of the property. So that would mean that what is kind of left there can be minimized. It doesn't have to meet the transition area requirements. There are 2 other areas on the property that have the green infrastructure, rain gardens. We're not going to talk about those. And anything else that has been proposed on the property in terms of landscaping is not necessarily for screening purposes. So, for instance, the garage, the landscaping is appreciated, and of course, some of those trees are proposed in order to meet the replacement requirements. But the extra, shall we say, grasses and perennials would not be required per code unless, of course, there would be a structure that would be constructed there. So we feel that one of the things that we are proposing as part of this is, again, the reduction in the number of trees. So instead of 54, 27 outside of the buffer area, if that is something that the Plan Commission agrees with. Also, if the Plan Commission agrees with this, the termination of the transition zone at the western edge of the garage, that would be something that would be incorporated along with the tree replacement number in the motion for approval. We feel that this is a kind of a, not necessarily a compromise, but it's something that will reduce the number of landscape treatments that would have to be on the property. We feel that, reducing it still meets the spirit and the intent of the code while still allowing the applicant to have a little bit of flexibility with the requirements. And as far as the life safety plan is concerned, we have been contacted by an architect who is preparing that. It's not finished at this point, so I have added the condition that the life safety plan actually be approved by the fire department prior to occupancy or any other permits being issued. That was something that we had thought was going to be completed, so we didn't think there was going to be a need for including that in the motion. Whether or not it's included in the motion, however, it's still a requirement. And then the final thing is the sign. We have the graphic that has been shown to the Plan Commission. However, the dimensions for that sign still need to be on the graphic. The graphic doesn't match what's on the house right now. So we do need to have an accurate representation so that we can determine compliance with code. The rest of the suggested motion for approval includes conditions to meet code requirements. Some of these are the same as what were in the previous report. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Before we go to the council applicant, do you want to say anything before we start and take it to the commission?
Jason Heinen, 14170 West Greenfield Avenue, Brookfield. I represent Mr. Fink. I guess our only concern with the proposed motions or conditions in the suggested motion is we appreciate the leniency of going from 54 to 27. However, I don't know that my client can even afford the 27 trees. What we would maybe suggest as an alternative would be, and I don't know if there's already any kind of time limit within the 27, but could we do 2 trees every year over the next 15 years? I think part of what's driving that is in conversations with the architect, we are dealing with having to put in about a $35,000 sprinkler system on the second floor. So he's realizing there's going to be some significant costs already. Plus, you're seeing the amount of landscaping he's already having to do just for the screening. With regards to that, I have communicated this to staff already, but the installation size of all parking lot screening plants, according to the landscaper, has been proposed at 3 feet or taller. I don't know if there's just a miscommunication on that being on the plan, but that is what the landscaper is telling me, and I've communicated that to staff. But if that's a concern that we need to correct something on that plan, we can certainly do that. Otherwise, we just ask for some different language around a minimum of 27 trees being a minimum of 2 trees being planted outside the transition zone over the next 15 years. And in terms of removal of the 8-foot fence, my client would prefer to have it be just a reduction down to 6-foot fence. He is planning on removing any trash receptacle within that fence area, but he would like to use it as a pet fence. I know there's probably some permits we need to obtain for that, but as opposed to the condition being removal, he'd like to, obviously he's put money into a brand new wood fence. He'd like to retain 6/8 of it. Those are my only comments.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the commission. Chauncey, you want to start us out tonight?
Surely. I do have questions for the applicant. So one of the questions is in regards to one of the requests to have the fence switched with the, what was it? Give me one moment. With the transition zone. Can you help me on this? It was switching the fence with the tree line, is that correct?
So yes. In the code, the transition zone area does require the incorporation of a fence and landscaping, although I believe the Plan Commission has the authority to determine whether or not the fence is required if there's sufficient landscaping to create a buffer there. If the fence is to remain on the south, the requirement is actually for the fence to be behind the landscaping, so the landscaping faces the south property line. We would just be amenable to if the trees were planted on the south side of the fence rather than everything being inside the fence itself. Kind of creates more of a buffer area, which is what the transition zone is intended to do. Honestly, in this location, I don't see that a fence would be necessary if there's sufficient landscaping to create that buffer zone. And it doesn't have to be a buffer zone of complete opaque coverage. It's just intended to provide that area so that the business is not negatively impacting the residential to the south. And with that 15-foot area, as long as there are trees, bushes of some height, I think that would accomplish it. If it's going to be just a fence, though, we would require the fence with the trees.
Thanks, Carrie. So my question to the applicant, what's the plan for this transition zone and the wood fence?
We would just be putting landscaping in, no fence there.
Okay.
So if that's the case, then the plans just need to be updated and the Plan Commission needs to approve that there would not be a requirement for a fence in that location.
And then another question about the tree spacings that Carrie had shown to kind of space the trees out. Any feedback about that?
No, I'm leaving it up to the landscaper to provide their expertise there.
Okay, and then another question about the trash enclosure, of updating the wood on the trash enclosure.
Yeah, we would be removing any kind of trash receptacles within that trash enclosure. So we're no longer seeking any kind of trash enclosure. But it is a wood enclosure that he put in prior to my being involved or us petitioning this, and so he is hoping to convert that to some kind of pet kennel.
So no trash, oh, my apologies, please
No,
continue.
you're fine, just as opposed to complete removal.
Okay, so no trash will be on the grounds on the outside. Am I understanding that correctly?
There'll be trash associated with the residents
Oh.
in the area close to the house, within I think there's a 4-foot fence around that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Fred?
Okay, I have a question about this life safety plan. Can you explain that a little bit that you have to do? Is that related to the building?
Yes, correct. I believe we've we've been in touch with an architect since our last meeting. He's put together the floor plan and been in communication with the state around the code. What we're coming to realize is that this property doesn't fit nicely within the code. So it's looking like the requirement per the code is that there would need to be some kind of sprinkler system on the second floor. I don't know how my clients, I mean, it's a house structure. It's been a house structure. It was operating as a house prior to this. So I don't know what his hope is there, but that is what the code is requiring, is a sprinkler system.
You have no problem with some type of safety plan?
Great, we have no problem with the safety plan. We're happy to, we were anticipating, it had to do with the size of hallways, doorways, lighting for exit signs. He had no problem with that. The most costly things that are coming out of that is the ADA required bathroom and the sprinkler system. There also seems to be some kind of weight requirement for the upstairs. I don't know all the details. The architect's working with my client on that. We recognize safety is important. I think where it plays into the landscaping plan is if he's got to dump several $1,000s into the house and building structure to bring it up to code for commercial use, then he doesn't have a whole lot of money to spend on trees. And so we're trying to weigh those things and figure out how we can get this done.
Do you have any problems with the 27 trees that they're requesting?
Yes, yeah, I'd prefer it be he can't uncut his trees. So I think what I'd like to see is something more along the lines of maybe 2 trees over the next 15 years, where it's a practice of him planting trees to slowly replace them over time. And that would give him a financial buffer to do the work to the building.
And then last thing is the entrance you have onto the property off of Pennsylvania. That driveway is only about 11.5 feet wide, and the code requires something like 22 feet wide.
Yeah,
Are you going to update that driveway at all?
No, that we're kind of running into the distance from the building to the intersection. And so when we did the site plan, the engineer recommended we just keep that a one-way, which it is currently. So all traffic enters off of Rawson and then exits off of Pennsylvania. There's not two-way traffic there.
Have a driveway coming off of Rawson onto the property?
Yeah, there is already, correct.
Okay. All right, that's it for me.
Chris, you're up.
I would say that on the number of trees, I wouldn't be comfortable with going 15 years to per year until you get to the 27. I think that we got to look at what was done and now how you rectified it and come to a happy medium. I think what staff came up with is a good idea of 27, and that's what I would support.
Yeah. Craig?
First question, I think, is for Carrie. The wood fence, as regard to a pet fence, is there any concern? I mean, once they remove the trash enclosure, it's just a wood fence then, correct? Or
If
once
it's-
they remove the trash receptacle?
Correct. So if it's reduced in height to 4 feet, as long as there's no trash, as long as there's no outside storage, if it's used as a fence for a dog run, we have nothing in the code that would prevent that. Now, saying kenneling kind of is, I don't think that this was the intention, but having a kennel outside is not something that we would necessarily be allowed to permit. But if it's just for, the dog to kind of go out and do its thing, as long as it's 4 feet high, again, there's no outdoor storage, there's no trash receptacle, there's no other thing in there, that's fine.
The rain gardens, I know you said that there's really no discussion. Those are required, so they're not leaving, correct?
Correct.
Okay. far as the termination of the buffer between the residential, I have no concern, and it sounds like if they're gonna landscape versus a fence there, that sounds fine to me. The 27 tree reduction, I mean, I would support that. I mean, I would personally be fine even if it went a little bit lower than that. It seems like, I just want to confirm, by the proposed plan, these are 54 trees, correct?
The
Ish.
requirement is for the replacement of 54 trees if all of the trees that were removed were of quality and met all of the criteria. Now, the tree replacement requirement is in addition to any other landscaping requirement. So there may be 54 trees is what we're going to go with as far as meeting code requirements. But staff is not recommending that we have 54 trees replaced on this property. Staff is recommending that we have 27 trees.
Okay. The proposed plan looks like a lot of trees.
It does.
So the reduction is fine by me. I would propose not reducing anything in the corner on Rawson and Pennsylvania. I mean, that's kind of the main corner that faces the entrance to Oak Creek as well as both streets. And it looks like by the plan there are trees in there, so those I wouldn't reduce at all. As far as the general border of the property, I mean, I would support a reduction in trees there. Yeah, like the green, the blue, and the white areas.
Well, the blue is the transition zone.
Okay. So then the green and the white areas, I mean, I'd be fine with the reduction. I don't know that I would say 2 a year for the next 15 years would be okay, but filling that somewhat with trees and still adding over a couple years or a few years, I mean, I would be fine with. But 2 a year for 15 years seems like a very long time to put trees in. But with that said, I wouldn't reduce anything in the yellow portion because you want that corner to stand out, I would say. So that's my 2 cents.
Nothing further from engineering. We had worked with a designer a couple months ago on green infrastructure, and all of that's been approved and looks good.
Dawn?
I would just make those same comments as Greg. That whole front part and the tradition. Yep.
Transition zone.
Yep. That those are the most important, and to the neighbors and to the community. So no reduction; those be done immediately, and then the adding of the trees in the backyard could be done on a staggered. I don't believe 2 a year, but on some kind of staggered system. But that front corner, it's going to need them really important. Yep.
All right, Christine?
Okay, first question to you, Carrie. I thought when you put the number of trees to 27, is there a range for the diameter of the trees that are going to be put in, or the age or the height?
So per code, anything removed between 12 and 29 dBH has to be replaced at a minimum of 2.5 inch caliber. And that's why it's a 3-to-1, because the requirement is for no reduction in canopy. Now, I will say that while I appreciate the input regarding planting trees over time, staff have no way of tracking that. So we would have to do multiple inspections to count the number of trees in order to determine compliance with that. So, and the other part of this is, again, no reduction in canopy. So that would give me pause. I'd rather have, maybe another smaller reduction in the number of trees rather than going in over time. Because the other part of this that we have is occupancy. Occupancy is really the time that we tie the landscaping requirements into the project. So our policy is we don't sign off on occupancy until the landscaping is in and approved and installed. We have no way of doing that over time unless they post a landscape escrow. And really, the landscape escrow is only intended to provide for those opportunities for occupancy outside of the planting season. We have no other policy that allows us that much of leniency for the installation. And as it concerns the number of trees, we would have to go in and physically not only count but document the location of all the trees over time as well. We don't have the staff to do that. It would be very difficult to track, especially if we're doing them over multiple years. We don't necessarily know that staff will be around in 15 years as the same people to be tracking this. Not that that's going to be something to necessarily sway the Plan Commission's decision, but it is a difficult thing for us to track and maintain, and the requirement is for the trees to be in at the time that the development occurs.
I agree, and my feedback on this is defeat the purpose of the staggering of the installation of those trees. I understand your recommendation is for financial issues only. However, putting them every 2 years from that purpose of installing those trees is just it defeat the purpose. When you see two trees here and you just go around the parcel, or if I'm one of the resident or the neighbor, it just doesn't meet or doesn't it defeat the purpose of that entire plan of adding all those trees that were already cut or removed from the property. So, and the staff working with you guys to come from 54 all the way down to 27, this is very generous. I haven't seen that, but this is very generous cut for you guys to work with. So I would personally be sticking with the 27 and not staging them at all. It's just 2 trees. If I go back and just saw 2 trees, it just doesn't make any sense to me. That's it for me.
Is that it, Christine? Okay, guess I get a turn. So let's start with the landscape, the 3 foot or taller, whether it was a miscommunication or whatever. We need that in writing from the landscaper or electronically through an email, because if it isn't on paper, it doesn't happen. That is our code. That's what we need. So.
We did have a chart that gave the symbol, the installation height, and mature height, all the stuff that we require per code. The issue is in the chart, they did not indicate the heights of all of the plants because they indicated gallons, which is the pot. We need the height to be specified. So that may have been the miscommunication from the landscape
Regardless
architect.
of what it is, we really
need
to
the
get
height.
that straight
Yeah.
as well. Hate to belabor the point, but 27 trees over 15 years, holy smokes, the building may not be there, the business may not be there. I hope I'm around in 15 years, but I can't take my time to count it either. I think Carrie made a good point of it. We got to come up with a compromise on that. I do agree with Greg. Talking the green area that I'm looking at looks rather crowded. Carrie brought it up. I would have the landscaper confer. I'm sure if he's a professional landscaper, he should know what the deal is with trees and spacing, but you can always confer with our forester. It's a good resource to use. And I'd be along with Greg. I get that. You could probably reduce that as well as on that white section. Not so much transition at the residential end. We want that, as Carrie said, to be a buffer. The fence, I'm cool with the vegetation. The fence comes down. I want to talk about the enclosure a little bit because I'm a little confused. So currently we have residential garbage bins behind that enclosure, that 8 foot wood enclosure, correct?
No, currently, let me see if I can bring this up here. This is the location of the residential
Okay.
cans, and it has a 4 foot fence kind of screening those.
Okay.
The trash enclosure that we were talking about that has an 8 foot tall fence right now is right here.
That would have to go masonry.
If the dumpsters were to remain, but what we are hearing is that the dumpsters are going to go away. The trash receptacles are going to go away, and that is going to be reduced in height to 4 feet for a pet area.
We're gonna have a business that generates no garbage. Sorry, call me a doubting Thomas. I find that hard to believe when you're a contracting business and you're not gonna create any garbage that isn't gonna go into residential bins. Now we're kind of mixing residential garbage with commercial garbage. I have an issue with that. We have to have a business dumpster on there. We require every business to have their own dumpster. And we don't put that on the taxpayers because this is a for-profit business. So we have to come up with something going on there. I'm not comfortable at all with that. I do agree with Greg. The hard corner of Rawson in Pennsylvania should remain the way it is. What else do I have here? Life safety plan. In regards to that, for any occupancy, that life safety plan would have to be in place, correct?
That is correct. And I did receive an email from Assistant Chief Havey, who apologizes that he's not able to be here tonight, but as of Wednesday last week, he said that he had not received any updates for this property and was still waiting for plans from the architect. So he's not seen anything. Whether or not the information coming from the state is something that the fire department would require on their end, I don't know. We haven't seen any plans, so I can't really speak to that, and I can't speak for Assistant Chief Havey other than to say that his email indicates that he hasn't seen anything yet. He has been contacted by the architect, but there have been no plans submitted to him.
So, again, we're kind of mixing peas and carrots here, but when we're talking occupancy, are we talking residential occupancy or business occupancy?
I can't answer that question now because I don't know what the requirements are going to be from both the state and the fire department. We have not seen a plan, so I just cannot speak to that. The requirement is the requirement, though.
Oh, I understand that. I'm wondering how this affects the applicant and their occupancy.
Can't answer that
I'm sure
question.
they're anxious to put this to rest as we are, but we're really incomplete here without that. So when we get into condition 1, that all relevant code requirements remain in effect, certified survey maps, do we actually list in there that the life safety plan has to be filed and in place?
I've actually added a
Oh, you did
suggested
add that.
condition that the life safety plan be approved by the fire department and inspection prior to issuance of permits and occupancy.
For my request, we have to figure out that commercial trash enclosure, one way or the other. Other than that, I get it. I mean, these are the difficulties. I sympathize a little bit with having to put in a sprinkler system, but I guess that's a choice you make when you mix a residence with a commercial building and so on and so forth. And it's a little bit of a difficult property because it does fall in a commercial district and also a residential district. So it's in that weird transition, but it's living in two worlds, and that's the tough part. So we have to provide the greatest protection, and that would be for probably the commercial code, I would think. So I do trust staff on that one. If it needs to be sprinkled, it needs to be sprinkled. So, although that has nothing to do with this, I'm getting a little off topic there. As far as the sign goes, same thing. We need all the numbers to match, regardless of what's there. And I guess this is a question. I know the sign ain't on the agenda, but Carrie, can that sign be attached to the side of the building, or does it have to stand by itself?
The sign can be, well, it would be considered a wall sign, so it would need to meet all of the requirements per code for a wall sign. So dimensions can be no more than a certain percentage of the wall area on which it's hung, can be no taller than a certain height, no more than a certain square footage based on that overall wall. And what am I missing? It's not lit, so we don't have to worry about lighting requirements for that. And it's not extending above the height of the roof, so we don't have to worry about that. It cannot project any more than a certain number of inches from the wall itself, but since it's a flat sign, I don't anticipate that it'll be more than that. But yeah, it just needs to meet code requirements.
Okay. Then one more thing, and this really came about with the request on 27 trees in condition 4, we specify a minimum of 27 trees. If, I'm not a forester or a landscaper, but if we decide, as Commissioner Lorick and myself kind of stated, it's kind of overkill and we can thin those trees out for their health and probably for the beautification of the property and cost-cutting measures. How do we determine that number, or how can we, I'm asking you to, I always do this to you, sorry, put you on the spot to wordsmith it, make it work for both worlds between what's acceptable to us as a city and our forester, and so the landscaper has something that he knows he's working with. Because his vision of thinning that out could be 3 trees. That's not my vision, but I'm not a landscaper.
Well, what I can tell you is that what's shown on the screen is pretty dense and that incorporates 54. So if we reduce it down to 27, there should theoretically be enough room to spread them out a little bit more.
Greg asked that. You are showing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just counted the plan. Taking away the existing ones, it's 54 trees on this plan. So
Okay.
I left the corner, as I suggested, and even if I went with every third tree around the perimeter, I think it came out to 26. So 27 doesn't seem that far off.
Okay, Greg did the math for me, so thank you for that. So I got,
I have a question. Doesn't it depend on the diameter of the tree? Because
maybe the type of tree when it grows up.
Yeah.
I can't answer that.
it could be like maybe like a bigger trunk of the tree. Maybe it's one. It could go to 2 to 3.
So
three
I mean,
trees.
if they're evergreens, they're gonna spread like crazy.
Well, the requirement per code does specify a certain kind of tree, but I am including the proposed arborvitae that is on the west to count toward the 27. So I'm not saying that all of the trees can be evergreen because the code doesn't allow for that either. It doesn't require them to be a mix. So I don't have a problem with the species. I don't have the problem with the proposed height of the evergreens. I don't have a problem with the caliper as long as it's a minimum of 2.5 inches. That's fine. As long as it meets the code requirements, I have no issues with that.
I mean, that's what I counted. I personally, if the arborvitae are taking the place of trees or counting in that area and eliminating all of those trees, I mean, I probably wouldn't, and this is, again, a non-professional landscaper, I mean, I wouldn't go any less than 20, I don't think. It'd have to be at least 20. Just subtracting around the arborvitae and then going every other tree or every third tree around the perimeter. You're between 20 and 26.
Hard call on paper to look at.
But going from 26 is not.
Probably made it worse than it was than questioning the conditions. Is there any other further discussion? Questions?
I guess staff would just have a question with regard to your concern for the trash enclosure management.
Yeah, what can they do? I get the masonry is a cost, and we have to do it, believe me, sir. In my day, I've seen a lot of dumpster fires, not just here in Oak Creek, but throughout the area, and that's really what drove the code change just recently. Was a really bad one we had right here in the square. How do we get that to work?
This just to be aware, this we're asking for office space, so it's not as though we're out running a construction company.
Understood.
It is,
I work out of an office building. I'm required to have 2 dumpsters, one for recycle and one for just use paper products in their 3-yard
I
dumpsters.
don't think we have a dumpster at our office.
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
just telling you. I think that might be how he's doing it. I don't know. He's not wanting one anymore. Because he doesn't want to spend the cost. He doesn't want to spend the money on the masonry structure. He's got to do all this other stuff to run what he wants to do already. Maybe he will at some point. He might come back and ask for that.
I get it. I can tell you, and again, this is just my thing at my office building for people abuse dumping in my regular, we had just like residential bins, and we couldn't lock them. So during the pandemic, everybody took the liberty of dumping in our garbage and mixing materials. So we had to go to locked dumpsters. But anyhow, one thing that I've seen people in Oak Creek do, because we're supposed to screen our residential ones, is they just went to Menards and got bricks, got blocks, and made a masonry structure around it. But
In this case, the issue is, it's not just the masonry enclosure, but I think there is a cost to also having the dumpsters.
without a doubt.
So it's a judgment call for the Plan Commission, honestly.
Yeah, and you may disagree with me. If you disagree with me, that's fine. I just feel every other business is asked to do it.
I'm sorry, but I disagree not having one because should be the standard for every business out there. I'm sure he's going to have some paperwork that need to be shredding or get picked up or somehow, no matter how smaller or the bigger the business is. So maybe your office doesn't have it, but every other office I worked at, they all had one.
It may not have to be dumpsters. It could be carts.
But I believe there are roll carts for
Is it-
commercial. I don't know how big
Is
they
it
are.
part of the code somewhere that they have to have a dumpster? I mean, I agree they should have a dumpster. But is there a code
If the
to back
code
that
says
up?
it doesn't need it, I'm mistaken then it's
I
a moot
believe,
point.
per the conditional use permit, trash receptacles as required by the Plan Commission, including the screening for such.
Yeah, if it's required, I don't know that a business owner could just say, I don't want one. It's required. But if there's no requirement somewhere, as much as I can say, I think they should have one. I can't make them.
There's nothing in the zoning code that specifies like a certain size of dumpster per business or certain square feet or anything like that. But per the CUP, it does say that trash receptacles as determined as necessary, I'm paraphrasing, by the Plan Commission.
Carry the garage.
Yes.
Is it masonry?
No.
Can they house their carts in the garage?
We have nothing that says, well, actually, I take that back. If there's going to be storage of any kind of flammable materials, so for instance, in this case, just take for sake of argument, they bring home paint cans, they bring home rags, whatever. There would be fire department concerns for storage because I understood that it is half residential, but the other half is commercial now. So there are standards for that too. I don't think they would require necessarily like a sprinkler system, but there
I know.
are concerns from the fire department for storage of
I
those
know,
materials.
and this is the problem we get into because now we're assuming there's going to be paint cans because they're a painting contractor, but they're assuming they're going to generate no garbage. I mean, we all generate garbage. I don't know how to get around that one. I truly don't, but I feel I really had to raise a question there because we've had difficulties with this. We have difficulties with residential units as well. But don't even get into this. So.
Mayor, I do agree with you on the dumpster aspect that I feel that they should have something there that is needing to be screened by brick.
No, I mean, I agree with you, Carrie. I don't know. There's no way other than through a random fire inspection or a yearly fire inspection, find out what's being stored in there. And this is where you get into that gray area. Is the garage part of the business or is garage part of the residence?
I would say that the garage is part of the residence.
I would agree with you.
And all the parking is all the parking for the commercial area is in those 6 stalls for the business. So there should be no other contractor or business vehicles being parked in front of or south of the parking
So
area.
if the residential garbages theoretically went in the garage, where you showed me the residential ones next to the building,
Yes.
can you go back to that?
Yep. Oop.
You highlighted it really nicely for us last time.
Right here.
Oh, right there. If he took that and put the cans next to the house for the commercial business and just built a half masonry wall to screen it from the parking lot, which is his parking lot, would he be okay?
I'd have to check the code requirement, but I believe it's screened on 3 sides.
Well, you'd have the building on 2 sides.
Depends on how big the trash bins are.
We're talking just residential bins if he's generating no garbage.
Well, the residential bins are already screened. In that location, they have a 4-foot tall fence.
Okay, but because it's a business, it's gonna go masonry. What I'm saying is we designate the business ones next to the house, so he's only gotta put up the one masonry wall. And he takes the residential ones in the garage.
I can't speak to that right now. I'd have to check the code on whether that would meet the requirement. That's not a very large area either.
Well, he's
Whether-
got 2 cans there now, right?
But the residential rolling bins,
Right.
I'm not sure that would be a large enough area to put in a commercial-sized trash receptacle.
Waste management will pick up the carts. They used to for me.
The same size cart as a residential would be
Yeah.
for a commercial?
Yeah, I'd still have them if it wasn't for people, neighbors abusing it, but that's where I'm coming up with the example, and then all you'd have to do is build that one wall. Can we work,
It's possible, but I would have to.
can we
kind of-
investigate that?
Sure.
Go that route. I mean,
But
then
I
you'll-
can't, I don't think I can craft that into a condition. I apologize.
No, you can't. So what do we do? Can we give him what he has and then say occupancy is dependent on solution to the trash enclosure?
If trash receptacles are going to be required by the Plan Commission for the commercial portion of the property, they will have to be screened per code. We can work with the applicant on what that requirement is going to be, but it won't be able to be screened with a wood fence per code.
I can probably live with that. I know it's aggravation, on both parties, but I'd prefer to find a decent compromise to make this work. So the next business doesn't come in and go, guess what, we got no garbage.
I actually have an idea. Maybe one of the idea that he cannot do it now is financially, right? Because of all the costs that he's going through. So maybe we can, just an idea, give him an exception this year or maybe next year for no shielding from the street or any residents for the next 2 years and just get away with just a regular fence. And then after that, in the conditions that he has to go up and replace it with a non-flammable fence.
We, unfortunately, with conditions like that, that put a time frame on transitioning something, it's kind of the same thing about planting trees every couple of years, because it's a matter of staff having to go out and, go to the property to determine whether or not the condition has been fulfilled after a certain time frame. We have nothing to tie to it other than possibly a violation letter. And it may come back to the Plan Commission. We actually had a condition for one of the properties that recently came before the Plan Commission for a sign plan. They were supposed to transition the sign 10 years ago. So it's a matter of tracking those conditions and then having the staff resources to do something like that. We don't have occupancy to tie this to, so there's nothing else other than a violation situation.
Yeah, and now a point's been brought across here to my attention. If they were never gonna generate garbage, why were dumpsters drawn in there in the first place? So I mean, it just begs that the business is gonna need a dumpster or trash carts. Gonna need a receptacle for whatever the business generates, so. Staff, we're just gonna have to work out something somewhere, whether it's using carts provided by an entity such as GFI or GFL, whatever they are these days, or waste management, and have a designation between the residential cans and the business cans. I think we just put it in as a condition.
So, okay, bear with me. Condition number 5, if we go to the conditions. Instead of saying that the existing 8-foot tall wood fence around the trash receptacle is removed, I am proposing that the existing 8-foot tall wood fence around the trash receptacle is removed or reduced in height to a maximum of 4 feet and not used for outdoor storage or trash receptacles. Trash and/or recycling receptacles retained on the property must be screened with a masonry enclosure in conformance with code requirements.
When?
Immediately.
Exactly, because if you left it open, it just have to be.
Is it 4 feet or 6 feet?
6 feet would be the minimum for an enclosure for a trash receptacle.
But for non-trash receptacle?
I think the concern with having a 6-foot tall fence in that area is that it would be used for outdoor storage, so I would still recommend no taller than 4 feet. Not if the Plan Commission doesn't agree to it.
I think my client would ask for 6 feet. As opposed to 4.
6 feet for what purpose?
For the dog run.
Staff is supportive of 4 feet.
Question becomes height. If it's gonna be a trash enclosure, it's 6 foot. If it's gonna be storage of any type.
Storage is not allowed. Outdoor storage
it's
is not allowed.
That's why we don't wanna go with 6.
That's correct.
He does have a dog.
I will say that although I suggested the staggered tree potential after Carrie's argument of not having the staff to continuously go out and enforce that year after year, I would support the 4 foot, because if it's 6 foot, they're not going to be expected to go out and make sure there's nothing being stored behind that fence.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none.
I would just request a moment to finalize the condition number 5. I think we're ready to go.
Lorik moves that the Plan Commission approve the site and building plan submitted by Christopher Fink for trash enclosure, parking lot expansion, and landscaping on the properties at 7101 and 7115 South Pennsylvania Avenue with the following conditions. 1, that all relevant code requirements remain in effect. 2, that the certified survey map approved by the Common Council on May 2nd, 2023 is recorded prior to issuance of any permits for the property. 3, that a signed copy of the conditions and restrictions as part of the conditional use permit approved by the Common Council is submitted to the Department of Community Development prior to submission of permit applications. 4, that the landscape plans are revised to meet all code requirements for screening the parking area. Transition Zone C requirements on the south may terminate at the west garage line. A minimum of 27 trees outside of the transition zone shall be required in fulfillment of the tree preservation ordinance. 5, that the existing 8-foot wall wood fence around the trash receptacle is removed or reduced in height to a maximum of 4 feet and is not approved for outdoor storage or trash receptacles. Trash and or recycling receptacles retained on the property shall be screened with a masonry enclosure in conformance with code requirements. 6, that all required information for the sign, dimensions, materials, location, etc. is provided as part of the sign permit application. 7, that a life safety plan is provided for review and approval by the fire department and inspection department prior to issuance of any permits and occupancy. 8, that all required permits, paving, green infrastructure, sign, etc. are obtained prior to any further development or occupancy. And 9, that all final plans, site building, etc. are submitted in digital format for review by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications.
Guzekowski will second.
Roll call beginning with Dawn.
Grillo, aye.
Krasinski, aye.
Lorik, aye. Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Hannah, aye.
Okay, moving on to new business, item 8A. We will review site and related plans submitted by Rosemary Patterson Hillside Coffee House LLC for an addition to the existing parking lot on the property at 237 East Ryan Road. Sylvia.
Mr. Mayor, the commission will recall in June, the commission reviewed an official map amendment on this property to remove the required road that was recently approved by council. Today, we are looking at a plan review for an expansion to the parking lot to add 13 new parking stalls to the site. This is an overview of the current site showing their parking area, and then directly to the east is where they are proposing the parking lot expansion. This is the submitted plan that we have showing the proposed expansion. It's showing an addition of 16 parking stalls. And as you can see, it's a little hard to see in the projection, but in the existing parking area, 4 stalls will be removed to create a drive aisle to the new parking area. The width of the stalls as proposed meets code. We do still need information on the length of each parking stall to verify that that meets code. This is adding just over 4,900 square feet of impervious area, which falls under the threshold of 5,000 square feet, which would require green infrastructure. However, we have not received a landscape plan or a grading plan on this site. The landscape plan would need to show both the perimeter and the interior of landscape requirement, and then grading would need to show drainage and curb and gutter for the site. Because of the missing information, staff is recommending to hold this item. However, I do have a suggested motion as well for the commission to consider. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Sylvia. Applicant, you want to say anything before we start, please? We'll need your name and address.
Robert Patterson for Hillside Coffee House, 9060 South Chicago Court, Oak Creek. Basically, what's happened is we've gone through this process now. I got the paving company to give me the initial plan. They were supposed to come out and give me the elevations and the drainage. Our intent is to have it drain only on our property, which would be to the south. They're supposed to send out two guys to do the measurements and the drops. The current grade of the land right now actually supports what is required, but they didn't get it to me. And the other thing is the landscape company, I haven't received two of the proposals that I requested. So that's why I'm asking for an extension. I mean, we intend to go forward. It's just the contractors haven't gotten me the information I need.
Yeah, and we really have to make sure that we can't be, I know you got good intentions, but if we make a decision and then we harm your neighbor, that seems.
No, and we certainly don't, we're completely fine with, with meeting all the requirements. It's just, it's a hard time to get things done right now, it seems like, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what we're running up against.
So let's run it through the commission real quick. Christine?
I have nothing. You're right. No, everything looks good.
Dawn?
One question, do you just have one handicap spot?
Yes. Right, right now, that is all we are required for. With this expansion, I don't know if we're required for more or not. That's something that the paving company advised me on last time. I can bring that up with them, though. I'm supposed to have a meeting with them sometimes this week.
Isn't it based on square footage of the building? I think so, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Everything you're mentioning about what you're planning on submitting for grading plan and whatnot sounds good, so we'll look forward to seeing that.
I have no concerns if we're holding it. We'll see all this information next time.
Chris?
Agree.
Ed?
No questions.
Chauncey?
No questions, thank you.
Nothing from me either. I'm sure it'll all be fine. Just
Okay.
wait for the delays.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
On hold.
Just have one question.
Oh, yes. Carrie?
Mr. Patterson, would holding it to the next meeting give you sufficient time for,
I certainly hope so.
okay, then we'll hold it to the
I don't
next
want to hold
meeting.
it. I
the
don't want to
next-
hold it at all.
Next regular.
September 12th.
September already.
Maybe, is it appropriate to ask you a question? Sure. If we're coming up against that paving season with these guys being so busy and it's being put off, if I run into some problem with either the paving or the landscaping getting done, is there a certain time that this is good for?
Once you get approved?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
plan commission approval, you don't have to worry about getting that renewed. If you're going to be getting that done within a year, that's fine. What I would suggest that you do is submit now for your paving permit, and we can just put that on hold pending plan commission approval, so that once you get your plan commission approval, assuming all the plans look good, we can issue that paving permit. We'll work with you on the landscape installation. If it can get installed mostly before November 1st, that's fine.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Motion on 8A.
Seifert moves to put the item 8A on hold.
Guzekowski, I'll second.
It's just point of clarification until September 12th.
Second agree?
Yes.
Okay, with the addendum that it will be held till the September 12th planning meeting. All those, let's do a roll call. Ashley?
Shinsky, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Hannah, aye.
Hello, I.
Okay, moving on, we have 8B, signed plan review, submitted by Nick Young, F Street, OCLV LLC, for the Coast Department buildings at Lakeshore Commons Development on the property at 4005 East Lake Vista Parkway. The actual building address is 9324 South Breakaway Boulevard and 4178 East Hemlock Right.
I got this one.
You got this one?
Yep,
Jeez.
so this is for the Coast Apartments. These are the first two apartment buildings in Lakeshore Commons. What they're requesting is one wall sign for each building and then one projecting sign for the North Coast apartment building. So it'll be a little bit clearer once I go to the next slide. So these are the two buildings, and the sign for the wall for each building is the same. It's just on a different elevation. And the coast sign on the south side is the projecting sign. It needs to be shrunk just a little bit to meet code requirements, but otherwise it will be projecting out over a landscape area. So one of the questions that we had previously was what was the height, to make sure that nobody was kind of hitting their head as they're walking by, but that's been eliminated because the walkway is outside of the landscape area over which this will project. Same size sign for the other building. These are going to be located adjacent to the entry to the lobby leasing area, so that's basically just identifying where the buildings are. This does not include any kind of wayfinding or monument signs, but they will be required to be rolled into the overall master sign plan for the development. The applicants are aware of that. It's just one of those things where timing was an issue, kind of like the development monument signs that we had previously reviewed and approved. So all of those will be brought forward into a master plan to go to the Plan Commission. This will be the last one that we review on a case-by-case basis. So with that in mind, there is a suggested motion for Plan Commission consideration on the screen. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Applicant, you want to say anything, or you just want to wait for questions? Good choice. Okay, Jossie?
Yes, I do have a question for Carrie. Exactly what is a projection sign? Is it projected from the side of the building?
Yep, so a good example is if you go down Main Street in Drexel Town Square, and the little signs that kind of jut out from the building, those are projecting signs.
And from the example where it had coast, so that's projecting out?
No, that's a wall sign. Oh, I'm sorry, the square box.
The square box. Okay,
Yep.
that's the projecting. Okay, thank you.
All right, Fred?
No questions.
Chris?
No questions.
Greg?
No issues with the sign. I'm just curious because it's on the picture. Is the 1234 above coast the address?
That will be the address.
Okay.
But it's not 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey, Ashley?
No questions.
Dawn?
Is the color gray like that?
I don't actually know the answer to that question.
Hello, Katie Menakis with Rinka, 756 North Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So the coast building signage is, let's see, those, sorry, if you're talking about the projected sign, it's a gray box with white raised acrylic letters mounted. Yep.
Nothing here, thanks.
I have nothing either, so it's good to see some of the first residents getting a crack to live down there. It's great. Okay, motion then on 8B.
Lorick moves to approve the sign plans submitted by Nick Young, F Street, OCLV LLC, for the Lakeshore Commons property at 4005 East Lake Vista Parkway, buildings 9324 South Breakwater Boulevard and 4178 East Hemlock Drive, with the following conditions. 1, that all relevant code requirements and conditions of the traditional neighborhood development planned unit development remain in effect. 2, that all signs are included in the master sign plan for the Lakeshore Commons development. The master sign plan shall be reviewed and approved by the Plan Commission prior to submission of permit applications for all future signs in Lakeshore Commons. 3, that the projecting sign meets current code requirements for size, height, and projections. And 4, that all revised plans, site building, landscaping, etc., are submitted in digital format for review by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications.
Kuzikowski will second.
Roll call. Greg?
Lorick, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Kuzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Hannah, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Chinsky, aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Katie. Announcements. Dawn, what's going on at the market this week?
It's Potato Fest at the market. If you bring a non-perishable item, you get a free baked potato.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Just another reminder, out at Drexel Town Square tomorrow is family movie night. I understand Monsters Inc. is playing, so it could be some creepy stuff going on out there. But everybody's encouraged to come out there and watch the movie. Might be a little warm, but try to partake if you so dare. And I just want to wish everybody a happy Labor Day. I won't see you until after Labor Day, so please enjoy your holiday. Make it a safe one. With that, motion for adjournment.
Grillo moves to adjourn at 7:33.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call. Kavich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye. And I.
Grillo, aye.
Shinsky, aye.
Lorick, aye.
All right. Night, everybody.
Aye.
Very nice.
Hey.